Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first episode of the Supersonic Music Show with me, your host, Josh Reeves. Those of you familiar with my previous work and research into other topics may not like this show, so I just wanted to put that warning out. This is strictly a music show. We're going to be talking about all things music here on this show, not the other stuff that I kind of am known for, so I want to put that disclaimer out right away. This is not a show for conspiracies or anything like that. Strictly a music show, an outlet for me to talk to you about all things music, the music I love, music bands that I care about and am passionate about, and just my plethora of knowledge and experiences in the music industry and everything else. So we'll get into a wide variety of stuff here on the show. It's something I've wanted to do for quite a while, and I'm excited about doing it. And glad to be here with you. So this will be our first episode. I'm hoping to eventually expand this into interviews with actual artists and bring you exclusive interviews, one-on-one interviews with different bands and musicians and whatnot. And hopefully we'll move into that, and that's what I'm trying to move towards. So, but for now, we're just going to be talking about various topics. It'll be different every show. We'll get into a variety of things. Predominantly, just to let you know up front, my interest in music lies predominantly in rock music, whatever, in the many varieties and flavors there are of rock music. I mean, I don't consider myself a person who likes one specific style of music. I just like music in general. I mean, I like rock music. I like pop. Pop, I guess. I get all these terms. I hate all these terms because all these terms are industry terms that were cooked up by the corporations, by the record labels, in order to be able to put things in a nice box in order to be able to sell them to a specific demographic. And so this really was, I don't think ever larger than it was in the 1990s, and that's really where I came up into the music world, was in the 1990s, because I was just happened to be at that age when I first started going to concerts, being a teenager in the early 90s, and then playing in bands, being a musician, going to concerts and stuff. So, in that decade, you definitely saw it was so wide open. It was great in some ways, especially with the whole alternative music thing. Allowed bands, really a lot of bands really would have not made it any other way to come in and have a playing field to have an audience to reach. You really saw an eclectic bunch of bands come out during those times, not just the grunge bands and alternative bands and stuff like that, but it really allowed, that whole explosion of music allowed a freedom in music to come through that we probably won't ever see again. Considering the way the music industry is now, the model used to be that bands would go out and tour in order to promote their record that would then make money. That's turned around completely now. It's completely the opposite of that now. Now, bands make records to justify the tours to make money, because the relationship that people have with music is not the same as it used to be, and it's sad. People don't have that emotional connection with music that they used to have anymore. It's largely missing, and that's something that I'm passionate about, because that's something that I have. And it's sad to see how that's lost now on so many people. People used to wait outside record stores and wait for them to open to buy their new band's albums. You don't see that anymore. And I don't want to go into it, but it's definitely, I think, a part of just the homogenization of music. And the power of music is something that is so powerful that I think a lot of people don't really understand how powerful it is. And what I want to talk about in this episode, speaking of the 1990s, and fittingly, considering that our show is called the Supersonic Music Show, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite bands from the 1990s. In my opinion, one of the top two most important bands from the 1990s. That is Oasis. Now, Oasis, really in America anyway, this happens to a lot of British bands. A lot of British bands end up having a completely different career in, say, England and Europe and overseas and many other countries in the world than they do here. And one of the things that bands have had happen to them through the years, I'm talking about across all genres. Probably, well, and I don't know if you can see it, but I got my Kiss shirt on here. Probably, but one of the earliest examples I can think of this happening was the band Kiss back in, I guess, 76, whenever the Destroyer album came out. And we saw this happen. It happens even to this day, but it happened to Oasis is why I'm bringing this up. But you would have bands who were, in many cases, very hard-rocking bands, and record labels would key in on one particular ballad type of song and put that out as the single, and then the band would be unfairly associated with that type of song for forever. Probably the earliest example of that happening to a band was probably Kiss. The song Beth, which the rest of the band hated. It was totally done with Peter Criss and Eddie Kramer, the producer of that record. I mean, they went in and did it. The band didn't want to have anything to do with it. They didn't even want to put it out. They put the song out. Of course, it goes to number one. It becomes the biggest selling song Kiss ever had, and it's what paid for all their mansions. But it really didn't represent what the band was. Now, that's just one example. You can go forward. I'm trying to think. I can't think of every example of it. I know in the early 90s, you had, there was kind of the transition over from kind of the 80s hard rock bands towards transitioning over to the 90s alternative and rock bands that were come out then. There was, you had bands like Mr. Big, who were a very hard rocking band with, they're huge over in Japan and some great players in that, but most people only associate Mr. Big with their ballad song, To Be With You, because that was pretty much the only song that got played on the radio. Extreme, the band Extreme, another great example of that. Extreme, a huge hard rocking band, really like a Queen 2.0. They were really the second coming of Queen. Really, if you listen to their music, they had a lot of harmonies. Nuno Bettencourt, just absolute shredding guitars, but the one song, the only song really people even know of Extreme is More Than Words, the ballad. This also happened in America, at least, to the band Oasis, where you had them coming out with their first album in 1994, Definitely Maybe, which was really, I remember hearing that when it first came out. I saw Oasis on their first tour, and it just sounded like music that was made by somebody you hang out with. You know, it was like, I could hear, I was like, oh, this guy likes T-Rex, obviously. I'm a huge T-Rex fan. The song Cigarettes and Alcohol, they would blatantly rip off songs and just be flippant about it. Like, yeah, they would admit it. They just, we took little bits. And that's really was kind of the formula for a lot of their successful songs. The song Cigarettes and Alcohol, it's the exact riff that was taken from, that riff's been used a lot. It's always accredited to being taken from the T-Rex song, but if you actually go back and listen to the Hollies' Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, that riff is there, the same riff is there, and again, so it really seems like T-Rex took it from the Hollies, and then Oasis took it from T-Rex and the rest of it. But the reason I bring up Oasis here in the first episode is because coming out next week, I think it comes out Tuesday, or maybe Monday. It comes out the 31st is when that comes out. There's a new documentary coming out entitled Supersonic, Oasis. This was made by the producers who produced the documentary Amy on Amy Winehouse. I actually had an opportunity this past Monday this week, to attend an exclusive private screening, advanced screening of Supersonic, the Oasis documentary. So I was very lucky that I got to. I don't know how it happened. I guess I had my name on some media contact thing or something from the past, and heard about this, so I went and checked it out and went to go see the film. And being a huge Oasis fan, I was really excited about it. And it really, really is a fantastic film. Even if you're somebody who's not a very big fan of them, and you're just a fan of music in general, you really should see this documentary. Being a documentary filmmaker myself, I know how difficult it is to make a film. And I'm telling you, they probably had teams and millions of dollars, unlike I have when I make a documentary film. I'm one person, and I'm lucky to have a few $1,000s at most to make a film. But really, it's a monumental piece of work, and it encapsulates and captures the band from the beginning of the band in the early 1990s to their meteoric rise and basically peak at their appearance at Nebworth in 1996. So it doesn't go past their appearance at Nebworth. It stops right there. And, there's lots and lots of bootlegs and audio recordings and video recordings from a lot of the Oasis shows, but the Nebworth gig has always been one that collectors and people like myself have always wanted to get their hands on. And a lot of the quality of stuff out there is just terrible. Well, the band actually filmed the entire gig professionally, and with 35 millimeter movie cameras, professional audio, and the rest of it. But for whatever reason, they've never really given a straight answer, a reason why they did this. But for whatever reason, they decided to not put it out. So this documentary was originally going to be. They're originally going to put out the Nebworth Oasis show, but it ended up turning into this documentary. So in this documentary, you actually get to see, for the first time, the professionally shot audio and video of the Nebworth gig. And if you're not familiar with Nebworth in England it's really it's a place where they've had massive concerts at. And to put it in perspective for you, Led Zeppelin played what would be their final show. They didn't know it would be their final show at the time. It was 1979, 1980, maybe, something like that. And just in front of, this massive, massive audience. We're not talking about like a Wembley Stadium or something like that where you've got 75, 80,000 people. We're talking about upwards of 250 to 300,000 people in one gig, one show. And so to put it in perspective for you, Led Zeppelin, they started, I believe Led Zeppelin 1 came out in 1969. So essentially it took the band Led Zeppelin, as massive as they were and still are, pretty much their whole 10-year career to peak at that appearance at Nebworth. Queen, the same thing. Queen, it's pretty interesting because both Led Zeppelin and Queen share this thing with Nebworth where neither one of them knew at the time that was going to be their final shows, but both Led Zeppelin and Queen played their final shows at Nebworth. Queen played their final show with Freddie Mercury in 1986 at Nebworth. Massive audience, 250,000, 300,000 people, huge. Queen put out their first album in 1971, I believe, 72, 71, 71, I think, 72, somewhere in there. So essentially they were a band for 15 or so years before they got so massively big they culminated into their appearance at Nebworth. Oasis, 2 years. 2 years. A lot of people, I think, don't realize that. They went from being signed to a record label, being nobody's playing in front of 8 people, to playing at Nebworth within a span of 2 years. And this documentary really does a fantastic job at showing their beginnings. And there was, I'm somebody who's been a fan of the band, so I pretty much thought I knew all the stories and knew everything there was to know and had seen all the clips. And I was shocked at how much rare footage and and clips and everything there are in this film. It's really, really a fantastic film. One of the best documentaries, music documentaries I've ever seen. And I highly advise you to check it out, even if you're not really an Oasis fan. But as I was mentioning, this is a band who in the United States is prominently known for their hit singles Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova. Now, I can remember being a fan. Back in the early 1990s, I worked in record stores and stuff like that, so I was, I read all the magazines. I mean, I was still in, but I was more so then. I was just fanatical about music, insane about the way I am about, research and stuff I do on the other elements of work that I do. That passion for me started out with music, and I was just a junkie for it, man. I wanted to know everything. If I had a favorite band, I wanted to know everything about them and everything about the music and how it was produced and where it was recorded and what they used. I mean, that's how sick my knowledge is. Just to be point blank with you, I can tell you what mixing board, what band recorded, certain records on, what kind of tape they used, the type of tape machine. I mean, really, my knowledge is that sick. But back in those days, my primary source of finding out about new bands that nobody knew about was a show that used to come on MTV late nights on Sunday nights called 120 Minutes. A lot of you may remember that show. And it was a fantastic source for bands that you'd never heard of, that nobody had heard of. And that was always what gave me the little one-up back in the day was I would watch that and I would find all these fantastic bands, and then I would order the records at the record store that I worked at, and then I would play them there, and they'd be huge bands. For instance, the band Sublime. I got their first album, 40 Ounces to Freedom, in 1994, when nobody in Texas knew who they were. Nobody. Absolutely not. Nobody knew who they were. In fact, I had to go through like their independent label and they were shipped from some guys. The CDs were shipped to the record store from some guy's house. I mean, it was literally, they were nobodies then. And I started playing their record, 40 Ounces of Freedom, in the store, and we started selling them like hotcakes, And so Oasis came on my radar. I can't remember what song I heard first. It may have been Rock and Roll Star. I think it was Rock and Roll Star. And then Rock and Roll Star, I was like, wow, this is cool. It's kind of like, this singer kind of sounds like, to me immediately, Liam Gallagher's voice just immediately sounded like a cross between Johnny Rotten and not Noel Gallagher, that's his brother, Johnny Rotten and John Lennon. That was my immediate thing. And their music kind of sounded that too. It had some elements of old classic rock in it, but it also had a kind of a punky sound to it. But immediately I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And I think the next single they did after that was the song Live Forever. And that song, I'll put that song up with pretty much any song that's ever been written. It's just a fantastic song, one of the best songs ever. And that was really what got me. So I went out and got the record, definitely maybe, and just loved it, listened to it all the time. And then I heard they were coming to town. They came to Dallas and played at a venue called, it's not there anymore, but I hear it's coming back. It was two venues connected, actually. On one side you had a venue called the Bomb Factory, and on the other side you had a venue called Deep Ellum Live. And it was one building. And they brought back the Bomb Factory now, but now I hear they're going to bring back Deep Ellum Live too, which I'm excited about. I saw a lot of big bands, a lot of fantastic bands there back in the day. And Oasis was one of them, and I remember going to see them, and this was before they had hit and had really any airplay or anything. They only had the one album out. But when I watched this documentary, it made me realize like what was going on during that time. It was just crazy. I mean, I think like a lot of people assume, because it is this way in some bands, but it's not this way in every band. A lot of people assume that the front man, the lead singer, whoever the lead singer is, that he's the titular head, the leader of the band or something. But so when Oasis first came out, that was pretty much the perception that you had, was that this guy Liam was, he was running the show. But as the years went by and, we started to get more information on them, we started to find out that that wasn't the case. And that Oasis was started by Liam Gallagher, but his brother Noel came into the band because they didn't have any songs, and he had these great songs, and so they put it together. And so I went and saw them. That was probably 94, something like that. Loved that record. And then I remember didn't seem like it was too much longer. I mean, usually, bands, you have to wait a couple of years between records for bands. It seemed like definitely maybe, and because I think definitely maybe took a little bit longer to get here to the States than it did overseas, but they came out with the next album pretty much right on top of it. And I remember driving around and hearing, I forget whether it was Wonderwall or Champagne Supernova, it was one of those two. I remember hearing it on the radio. Here's a new song from Oasis, hearing it, and I was like, oh my fucking God. They did it to another fucking band. I just, because just like I talked about, Kiss and, Extreme, all these bands, these awesome hard rocking bands who then get associated with these crappy fucking sappy ballad songs. And that is just a direct result of record labels believing that that's the type of song that is marketable and will sell the most. And when young bands are coming up and they don't have any experience and they don't have any pull and the ability to say, no, we don't want to do that, we don't want to go that route, that happens. So the first song came out and it was one of those, Champagne Supernova, and I was like, this is crap. I'm like, well, damn it, that sucks. I really had high hopes for this band, and I hated the song. I was like, fuck that, I'm not even going to buy the record. And I think a month later or something, there was another single out, Wonderwall. I was like, ugh. Which Wonderwall I like more now than I did then. I like all those songs more now than I did then. But when it first came on the radio and I first heard them, it was like 2 songs back to back. And then I think the third song came out was What's the Story, Morning Glory, and it was a little bit more rockin'. I was okay, this is a little chance. But then the last single they came out with was Don't Look Back in Anger. I remember seeing this video on MTV. And what was different about this song was this was the first song that they had released or had put on a record even that featured Noel Gallagher, the brother guitar player, on vocals. And there was just something about his voice that it still does. It just resonated with me personally. It's just something about it, and I just immediately was like, whoa, wait a minute. But I heard that song and was like, this, okay, maybe I was wrong, So I got the record, and there were some, there were some great songs on that. What's the Story of Morning Glory is still not my favorite. Probably, if I had to pick one that was probably my least favorite Oasis record, that would probably be it, even though it has massive hits. Some Might Say, I think, was on that record as well, which was their biggest charting hit. But, they've got songs like The Master Plan, which was a B-side. Where Did It All Go Wrong? What else? The Master Plan. Just so many great songs. I didn't find this out until later, that they have a whole catalog of hits and songs that were hits overseas and hit. I think they had something like 20 or 30 top 10 singles in Britain. And here it was like 2. Because the radio stations and the record labels, the way they are, and they're still this way, they were only going to play the stuff that was in their sort of wheelhouse. And then I went and saw Oasis again on that tour. Went to go see them again, and by this time the two brothers were really in the heart of their fighting and whatnot. And as we found out in the documentary, which I didn't know. Everybody knew Oasis were fucking doing drugs and drunk and everything else. They're British, They're young. Just like the bands themselves, the band members themselves say today in interviews, if you're 24 years old and you've grown up poor and all of a sudden you've got millions of dollars and you're a superstar, what are you going to do? You're going to fucking go crazy. You're not going to go home and go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. You're not going to do it. But I didn't know that they were into crystal meth. That was a shock to me in the documentary. That really explains a lot of the crazy erratic behavior, because this particular show, the second time I saw Oasis, and by that time they were already starting to get massive and had Wonderwall and all those songs out. So they were completely, the moment they came out on stage, I remember it was a totally different vibe than when I had seen them like a year before. Because then they were still coming up and broke. By this time they were stars, they had money, the whole vibe had changed. And at some point during the show, Noel and Liam had a huge blowout on stage, a fight. I mean, it wasn't a fist fight, but they were arguing, and Liam just walked off the stage and left. And so Noel had to go get an acoustic guitar and play the rest of the set acoustically with him singing. And I'd already kind of, like I said, I'd already heard Don't Look Back in Anger, and I was already like, wait a minute, this guy, why isn't he singing? That was my first thing. The first time I heard Noel Gallagher sing, I was like, wait a minute. What's going on here? If I had a guy in a band that sings like that guy, the other guy would be out. Fuck that guy. I mean, Liam Gallagher, his thing at the time, he had the look, he had the voice, he had the front man. He really was what sold the band to a lot of people. But Noel Gallagher is the primary songwriter. He writes all the songs, writes all the lyrics. And so after already being shocked by his, song Don't Look Back in Anger, then to see him in this live performance finishing out the show by himself on acoustic, I went from being like kind of a fan to being an Oasis fan to being not a fan at all to going, fuck these guys, I'm not ever going to listen to them again when they started coming out with all those cheesy radio singles, to then being sold completely, like, because I really understood it, because it was a totally different world back then. And that's what this movie, Supersonic, really encapsulates, is it, and Noel mentions this at the end of the film, it really encapsulates that period right at the tail end, right before the explosion of the internet. And it'll never happen that way again. Technology and stuff won't ever let it happen that way again. But it really captures that pre-internet period of bands growing through just word of mouth, nothing else really. You didn't have 24/7 stuff like you have now, and access to information. You couldn't, now you can go find anything you want to find out on any band or anybody. You can go find their whole life history in 2 seconds. Back then, you had to struggle to find information. So after that was when I was like, wait a second, okay, now I get this. I mean, Oasis, you can put anybody else back there playing the drums or guitar, which they did. They changed the lineups out ridiculously over time. But really what it boils down to is Noel Gallagher. I mean, whether you like Oasis or don't, he's the heart and soul. The key to that band is his voice and his songs and everything else. And then a few months later, they did the MTV Unplugged, which was a big thing for bands back then. Nirvana and many bands did those episodes. There were a lot of good ones. There were some early ones that a lot of people forgot about. One of the very earliest ones was like Stevie Ray Vaughan. That was a great one. I mean, there were so many good ones. I even liked the Stone Temple Pilots one. There's so many. But the Oasis one, I remember when hearing it was going to come on, so I was like, I'm going to tune in and watch this. And they come out on stage, and Noel says, Liam's not going to join us tonight. He's got a sore throat, so you're stuck with the ugly one. And looking back at this now, and then you see Liam, he's up in the fucking balcony heckling Noel and throwing shit at him. Noel, he found out 20 minutes before they're going to go on stage and record this live MTV Unplugged TV special that his brother's not going to sing, and he's got to sing all the songs, and he wasn't prepared. He'd never done it before. And I've seen him in interviews now say, "Oh, that show was shit. I was shit. I sucked." I really don't think he did, honestly. I mean, that's just what him coming down on himself. Honestly, that performance, that show, that right there really ultimately set the tone for the rest of Oasis's career up until their breakup in 2009 with the release of their last album, which was a great record. I mean, really, that last record they did, last two records they did, Don't Believe the Truth, came out in 2005, and then there was another one. Can't remember the name of the one that came out after that, but it had the song "The Shock of the Lightning" and stuff like that. It was just great, just a great record. They had Ringo's son playing with them for a while. Ringo Starr's son, Zach Starkey, playing drums with them. But that MTV Unplugged performance, looking back on it now, it makes me wonder if because after the first record came out, after Definitely Maybe came out, there was already talk that Noel was going to leave the band, and he was already considering going on to a solo career before Champagne Supernova and Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger and all those songs were even released. So those songs possibly were going to, at first, be on Noel Gallagher's first solo thing. Stuff wasn't working. Him and his brother weren't getting along. And then that MTV Unplugged performance, he just killed it. And there were so many songs. A lot of the songs they did are songs that when they do the recordings on the recorded versions are ones that Noel actually sang. But if you watch it, they've got a string section, they've got horns. They really deconstructed the songs and turned them into something completely different. All these people had charted music. Now, if he just decided at the last minute, when his brother, 20 minutes before the show happens, that they're going to change the set and he's going to do predominantly songs, there was a lot of songs, too, that he performed during that show that were ones that Liam sang, but there were a lot of them in there that were ones that he sang on the recordings anyway. So that's why I always thought, I think there was something staged about this. Because there's no way that those string players and those horn players and all that would have already had the songs down and were rehearsed. I mean, they'd played them a million times. So there was always kind of something about that I thought was staged. But this would go on to be later on, because this was people's first real exposure to Noel singing and playing. And that performance is just unbelievable. It's just incredible. It really is fantastic. You really get to see what a great songwriter he is during that MTV Unplugged performance, because the songs are stripped down and they have horns and strings and there's a guy playing harmonica on there. I mean, you could just see that, wow, even if you strip away the loud Marshall stacks, and you strip away the loud guitars and you take Liam out of the equation. When I watch that performance now, I can't imagine that performance going down with Liam Gallagher singing. It just wouldn't have worked. And he said since that he actually didn't have a sore throat, and that what it was is that he doesn't like singing those songs with acoustics, which I get. I mean, if you listen, his vocal style is a kind of a screaming vocal style, and a lot of vocalists had to develop that kind of vocal style from the days when you're coming up as a band and you don't have a professional PA system. You got loud ass amps and loud ass drums, and so in order to get yourself up over that, you kind of have to scream. That kind of screaming delivery would not have worked in that acoustic setting. It just wouldn't have. But what it did is it gave the world their first glimpse at the genius and talent of Noel Gallagher, and it kind of showed what a fucking knobhead that Liam Gallagher is. And this went on to be, up until the time they broke up, one of the huge differences that they would always have. Liam would always bitch about, because more and more as the albums went on, there would be more and more songs with Noel Gallagher singing them, because that's what fans wanted. But Liam did that shit to himself, man. he shot himself in the foot. Him pulling out of that Unplugged gig is what single-handedly showed the rest of the world what Noel could do. And had he not done that, it wouldn't have happened that way. And of course, Noel now does his own solo albums. The most recent one, I think it's called Chasing Yesterday. I'll have to listen to it again. The most recent one I didn't really like that much on the first listen. I need to go back and listen to it again. But the one before it that he came out with was just fantastic. Just a really great record. But it's crazy how hindsight, looking back at that now and how that all transpired, it's just amazing to see. And there's so many bands like that, that I watched that happen to, where I watched them go from nobodies to becoming massively huge. I'll tell more stories about that in coming shows and whatnot, and we'll talk more about different things. But this film is really fantastic. Supersonic, Oasis Supersonic documentary. Look it up. I think it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray on October 31st. And you definitely need to check this film out. I think it's really one of the best music documentaries ever. Noel Gallagher, if you're ever having a bad day, go listen to some interviews with Noel Gallagher. I mean, every time that fucking dude opens his mouth, gold comes out. I mean, he says some of the funniest shit. I'm trying to see if I think I might have some of his quotes here. I mean, just some of the funniest. The guy said he just truly does not give. He has not one fuck to give. Not one. He has not one. I mean, the guy just truly does not give a fuck. He will say anything, and I love that. I love that about him. Let me see if I can find this, because I had something I'd posted the other day. And it had some of these quotes, man. They just crack you the fuck up. Bear with me here. Where did it go? There it goes. One he says is, well, here's the thing. They speak in these Mancunian British accents, and some people can't understand what they say. But I've been listening to these guys for so long. It trips my friends out, my sister out too, because it'll be like, it'll hear somebody like, what did he say? And I'll pick it out. I'll clearly first try, I'll hear it. I remember seeing him on MTV one time, and they asked him about his songwriting. Oh, what do you think about your songwriting? I don't know. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's not Cobain and Morrissey or anything. That's pretty good. I was like, what did he say? I was like, I know exactly what he said. No, yes, I can tell you exactly what he said. I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't put it up there with Kurt Cobain or Morrissey or anything, but I think it's pretty good. But when you hear him say, I think it's pretty good. I don't put up the Kurt Cobain and Morrissey or anything, but I think it's pretty good. So sometimes you hear them, and they really have their own dialogue and speech, and they say in it, instead of saying isn't it, they say in it, INNIT. What's another one they say? One time I was watching something with some of the Oasis, and he asked Liam or one of them, hey, what do you think about this song? You like that song? You think it's a good song? Yeah, I'm mad for it, man. I'm fucking having it. Mad for it, man. Having it. Like, what? Mad for it. Having it. That's what he said. But he go, yeah, mad for it, man. Having it. What did he say? But here's a great quote. He says, I reckon if Tom York fucking shit, I can't even do it without cracking up. I'll crack up if I try to do it. I'm just going to read it straight, because if I do it in his voice, I'll just crack up. He says, I reckon if Tom York fucking shit, Tom York is the guy from Radiohead, if you don't know. I reckon if Tom York fucking shit into a light bulb and started blowing it like an empty beer bottle, it'd probably get 9 out of 10 in fucking Mojo. Oh my God. Here's another one. I read these interviews with Liam, and I don't know who this guy is who's in these interviews. He seems really cool. Because the guy I've been in a band with for the last 18 years is a fucking knobhead. Oh my God, he does really have some. It's just hilarious shit. He's like, they asked him who his biggest hero is. My mom, because she brought Liam Gallagher up. I mean, fuck me. What's another? This is a great one. You can say that you respect someone as an artist 1,000 times and it will never get reported. But you call someone a cunt once. I think he called... I don't remember who he's called a lot of people cunts, but I think he called Adele a cunt or something recently. I can't remember. He basically said that she made boring music for grannies, and I agree. It's fucking terrible. I mean, just the worst. Adele is ugh. But guess what? She's moving records. And I don't just mean like selling downloads and selling streams on Spotify or whatever. She's a unit mover. She has actually gotten people who don't buy physical music anymore to buy physical music. But, you know, again, never underestimate the mediocre taste of the buying public, that's for sure. Anyway, that's enough with that. But yeah, check out the documentary film, Oasis Supersonic. It comes out next week. Definitely worth the time to check out. And it's funny. I mean, it's really good. There was a lot of stuff in there I didn't know about, but there's lots of great Noel Gold in there. Lots of great quotes from him and stuff as well. So definitely check it out. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here. That's all for the first episode of the Supersonic Music Show with me, your host, Josh Reeves. We'll be back very soon with another episode, and we'll get into more topics of discussion and more things for you as time goes on. I'm excited about this new music show. So stay tuned, folks. All right, Josh Reeves signing out. Take care.